Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I'll Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And today we are here with another edition of Book Club. Spoilers, because this is from 2019. And also content warning for discussion of trauma, sexual assault, violence. We're not going to go too into detail, but it will be there. I'll also say this is weirdly similar to the plot of Blink Twice, the movie that just came out.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Oh, yeah. Also, for horror fans, as we are moving into Halloween time, you all know I love Silent Hill. This is, I could be wrong, but I'm very, very certain that I'm not. That this is slightly inspired by, at least slightly, what inspired Silent Hill, which is Centralia, Pennsylvania, which is a town where, still there, where coal mines are just burning from underneath. And so there's like smoke and it's really creepy and no one lives there. And you can look it up. It's freaky. But, okay. Today, we're talking about the 2019 graphic novel, The Low, Low Woods, issues 1 through 6, written by Carmen Maria Machado and with art by DaNi, with Tamara Bonvillain, the colorist, Sam Wolfe-Connolly, who was the cover artist, and Steve Wands, who was the letterer. It is a horror coming-of-age story about trauma and its lasting impacts. It really pulls you in. It's compelling, it's horrifying, it's poignant, and it's beautifully illustrated, which we'll talk about later. I really loved it. And this was funny because you had suggested several things. And I immediately was like, I've been wanting to read something from this author since we started doing this.
Yes. Which was perfect timing. It popped up and I was like, because we were also talking about we wanted to do some type of comics by a woman, and not realizing until I was like, oh, this is a DC world comic. And I was like, that's a really, 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 really cool. And I was like, yeah, this kind of covers all the things, including the fact that, yes, we're jumping into fall. That means spooky season for us all. And so this was almost perfect. I will say, had no idea what this was about. Just threw it out there. And then I was like, oh, not what I don't know what I was expecting. I think I had little to no expectation. But then, I was like, okay, yeah, it's definitely didn't know how this is where we were going. Okay.
Like we said before we started recording, it goes places.
It goes so many places.
It goes to a lot of places, but I really loved it. So I'm just going to run through the plot, Samantha.
Yes.
All right. So teen best friends Elidora, or Elle, and Octavia, or V, residents of the Pennsylvania town Shudder to Think, wake up in a movie theater not remembering watching the movie. When they confront Josh, the guy who works there, he acts really weird and like a complete jerk about it. Elle gives V a ride home on her bike, which is something that they often do. And when they crash after seeing a menacing-looking bunny, they're then attacked by what appears to be a skinless zombie. They escape, discussing next actions, but ultimately kind of disagree on what to do next. Elle thinks that they should tell someone. V thinks that they should just move on. I kind of love how they were like, oh, it's not that out of the ordinary.
But I think it's one of the things that shocked me. I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Why are they acting normal? There was a bunny, but it was a menacing bunny that huh?
Yeah, it was very well, what should we do about this zombie? And then we get a brief history of the town, which might explain some of their blasé-ness. So for generations, people have gotten sick from the local mining industry. The company that runs that industry ignores that. They've been replacing sick or unwilling workers. They've been buying up houses so that they can expand their industry. Then things seem to collapse and the mines catch on fire. It left a lasting impact on the town. People are sick, the town is damaged, and it seems there is this hell void where monsters come out and people just sort of roll with it or don't talk about it. We later learn that V and Elle met fighting off one of these zombies, and that once while they were camping there as kids, They promise to always believe each other. Anyway, V is really trying to get out of the town, eagerly awaiting college acceptance letters, while L doesn't think that there's any way that she can afford to go to get out. Meanwhile, V is really into someone, a girl named Jessica, and they share an intimate night together. When V wakes up in the middle of the night, Jessica has a huge void in her torso, like a huge void. V and L confront Josh again, who's just generally creepy, but lets slip that they probably went to heaven on earth in this time that they can't remember what happened. An all but abandoned strip club. I don't know.
I think it's like a nice actual club for rich people, the way they describe it. And so only rich people would go there. So it wasn't necessarily a strip club. That's what it seemed to me.
Yeah, it was, but it was like it's a weird place people go now that.
Now, yeah, that became like a party den.
So L and V decide to investigate, and in doing so, they pass through a graveyard dedicated to those who have died in service to the town or by suicide. While exploring the old club, V discovers glowing blue mushrooms and pockets some of them. There is a party going on when they're there, but things just seem off about it. V and L get into a big fight about college, all of the strange stuff going on, whether or not they should try to get to the bottom of it. And L reveals that night after the theater, her underwear was inside out. V walks off, furious about all of this. The next day, she goes to visit the local witch, which was a real twist I wasn't expecting, who is described as a local fixture, similar to like a postman. She looks like a little girl, but in fact is quite old. She makes a concoction that she says can smooth out the frayed edges of the forgotten memories, which V takes. Unsure if she'll use it. She just takes it and pockets it. The witch takes interest in the mushroom sample that V collected. Meanwhile, Elle goes to the park where she and V met with her dog Pearl and is attacked by another of the zombies. Her injuries seem to mirror inexplicably on V. You should kind of see this through contrasting panels in the comic. Elle and Pearl escape while V goes to visit Jessica, who shows her the bedridden body of her mother, who looks like she's transforming into something else. Not good. Jessica tells the whole story of how her mom would just disappear when she was a kid until she got Jessica into the beauty pageant circuit. She later told Jessica that she was turning into a void, and one day Jessica would too, especially if she felt too big of emotions, like after their first time together, after Jessica and V's first time together. And this leads to them having sex, which Elle across town seems to feel something of, or she just happens to be masturbating at the same time. I don't know. It's mirrored. So I feel like it was saying that they're feeling each other's emotions somehow. Elle and V make up. V comes over to Elle's house to have dinner. The house is attacked, and Elle's dad is attacked and taken to the hospital. They go back to visit the witch, who opens up about her own past. When she was actually young, the foreman of the local sanatorium convinced her to come with him to visit the facility, trying to get her to drink water that flowed in a cistern there. And she screamed, and a woman intervened. The foreman was arrested, and the girl was confined to a few months in the sanatorium. And there, Cersei, the woman who rescued her, a trans woman who was there because she wore something, quote, questionable, took her under her wing. Cersei called herself a witch and told the girl to never drink the water, that it makes you forget. The doctors and nurses pushed it. They were like, it heals you. But yeah, Cersei and the girl started to do experiments to reverse it. And eventually they returned to the girl's home, Cersei calling herself the girl's aunt. They experimented until they found a way to return the girl's memories. And it turned out the foreman had been visiting her for a very long time, and it is heavily implied sexually assaulting her. They figured out how to distill the blue mushrooms to bring people's memories back. But then men came and tortured and killed Cersei. The men started to become sloppy, not returning women to where they found them before they drugged them. So that was part of the, oh, when you hit puberty, you'll just wake up in a church parking lot. The witch was understandably furious about this and did a spell for men who had transgressed to go beneath the earth, but it sort of backfired and it brought the fire up through the ground. Meanwhile, worried remembering would break those who had suffered, the witch tried to send the women away, but turned them into, quote, half things, half rabbit, half deer. So the menacing rabbit from earlier, one of those. V is furious. The witch took away their choice, and the witch gives V the mushroom sample back. V and L learn that Jessica is at Heaven on Earth, and they go to help her. When they get there, Jessica has obviously been assaulted, but is dazed and doesn't remember anything. Josh is there and reveals that V and L, quote, drank deeply on that night in the theater. Some of the zombies show up attacking the women, but they fight back, as do some of the women monsters. Elle eats one of the mushrooms, bringing back her memories. She then asks Jessica if she wants to remember, and when Jessica consents, feeds Jessica a mushroom. As the memories come back, Jessica screams and her body turns into a void, swallowing up some of the men and zombies inside it. V and L gather a bunch of the mushrooms and offer women a choice. Drink me to forget, eat me, the mushrooms to remember. Very Alice in Wonderland. People make different choices. V gets into college. L asks V what she's going to do, remember or forget. It's unclear what she chooses in the end, but they hold each other in bed and they say that they love each other. And that's how it ends. Yeah, so it definitely goes places. I really liked it, though. I really liked it. So, themes. Obviously, often when we do these, coming of age was a big one.
Right.
Because this was a time when they're talking about going to college or not going to college and what that will look like. I did notice Elle had like a favorite teacher, and her name was on one of the graves at the like people who died in service to the town or by suicide graves.
Her full name or her last name?
Her last name.
I wonder if people...
I don't know if it was her, but I noticed her name was on one of the graves.
Interesting.
Yeah, but having them kind of talk about that, because that is one of the scary parts about going to college is when you have a really good friend and you know you might go on separate paths.
Right.
And that might be, you might not stay in touch. Your friendship might change or disappear. So having that a very clear dichotomy of V wanting to get out of this town and L being like, well, I can't though. So they might have to split.
Right.
Go on different paths. I also appreciated that they talked about The Awakening, the book, because I read that in high school too.
Right.
I feel like so many of us did. And I was just nodding my head like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I remember in my class, we had an assignment where we had to write whether we thought the main character died at the end by suicide or she died because she just swam too far and then was too tired. So we had to write essays about that. So, yeah.
Wow. The legend is that, like, what stuck in and most people reference is like, yeah, I'm going to go take myself. I'm going to go for a swim. Like, in implying that means, yeah, you're going to die by suicide. So that's interesting. Yeah, she had a bunch of points that were on either side of the argument. So I can't remember which I said. But
I can see either. And in that whole argument too was just class, because obviously Elle was saying she couldn't leave because she couldn't afford to leave.
Right.
She couldn't afford to go to college. And just a note, there was a lot of pop culture things that I liked in the background. There was some X-Files stuff, Sailor Moon stuff. There was Xena mentioned. So I liked that.
Nice.
I was thinking the other day about when I went to college and I'd like took down my room and like those kind of dorky posters. I was like, I don't know if I'll bring this to college.
No.
Yeah. Then there was also the theme of just pollution and capitalism. So here's a quote. Soot and smoke filled the air and dirtied the glass and the curtains, and you were grateful for it. You were grateful that the company gave you the opportunity to clean their messes. Which is a big theme, because also throughout, you see people who have, through some way or the other, been impacted by this company, whether they've lost someone, whether they're sick. Elle goes to visit someone who is sick because of the pollution left by this company. And, you know, the town is on fire.
Right.
So
constantly.
Yeah. And then the graveyard of people who have died in service to the town, as we mentioned, which I think is also leads into gentrification, because the company comes in and they're trying to buy up the houses. They're bringing in people to mine when locals refused. I think V's mom was even saying, like, the company is looking at buying our house.
Right.
Maybe we should do it.
For a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Then there's also generational trauma and memory in this. So it's interesting because when I first started reading it, the beginning, obviously, invokes Night of the Living Dead, when they wake up the theater and then everything is like wrong. And then there's zombies. There's these tales of women waking up, standing in a stupor in church parking lots after puberty. And so I wasn't sure. But then when you find out the truth of what's going on, like, that really sticks with you. It stuck with me, like, that they were in church parking lots.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it basically, they were being drugged to forget.
Right.
And this is where these horrible things were happening to them. Here's a quote. Some women had it happen so many times they forgot their own names. Environmental dementia, doctors told them. Something in the air, maybe. Or the water. Oh. Foreboding. Because, don't drink the water. It erases your memory. It's supposed to heal you. And it's revealed that this is because men were abusing them and just giving them this water, this drug, to forget. Which is also interesting because that feels very like, there are so many stories of the water that heals you or gives you eternal life.
Right.
And it was being used in this really horrific way. And then you see, one of the things that stuck out to me is sort of body memory. Because even though people were being made to forget, it seems like their bodies still remembered. So, like, when Jessica takes the mushroom, decides to remember, she has this scream that is described, quote, "It was rage and grief and something bigger, older, primordial, like the earth itself had been waiting to cry out since creation." And then the girl, the witch, when she screamed at the side of the water, it was like, it felt like to me like her body was just reacting. Like, even if she couldn't remember, something in her body was like, no. This is really bad. This is unsafe. And that sort of because from there, that guy did get arrested, but there's this also through line of it's less about people do cover up for the men who are caught using it, but it's like they shouldn't have gotten themselves caught.
Right.
We're allowed to keep doing this. It was on them that they got caught. And here's another quote. It isn't that no one believed us. It's worse than that. They knew.
Mm-hmm.
And they just were, well, it's on him. He got caught, but we're all going to keep doing this.
Right. Well, it almost implied that all the men were in cahoots, and it's like a generational learned thing. This is why the younger generations knew about the water and kept using it, which makes me wonder, because Elle's parents have a beautiful relationship. They're so great. They love each other, all these things. Wouldn't he have known? Like, he was a part of the crew as well. Like, it kind of implies that all the men, all the people, there was not really, outside of the father being so loving with the mother and great and all, there seemed to be an implication that it was all the men in that society, which was why the witch was like, yeah, burn them all. Because it's not that they didn't care or they didn't know. It was because they were trying to cover up. And also the cardinal sin of probably her being a minor may have been what played into him being arrested, because he got caught. But I don't know, because I don't think, it doesn't seem like any of the other men were caught or were punished, because we know that Cersei had gone through some things, whatever it may have been. Like, of course, her story is a little different, but in that partially, like, they came and killed her because she refused to take the water because she knew what it did. And so they had to, like, finally make her, like, just like, okay, we just have to get rid of her because she's causing a problem for the rest of us. So instead of doing that to the young witch, they arrested the man who died by suicide later. Or maybe not. There was like the conspiracy theory of like they just had to get rid of him because he was doing something that was a step too far in this whole plot. I didn't know for sure. But like, it did make me wonder about the father. I was like, he had to have known. He grew up in this era. He grew up in this time frame. Sure, he was not one of the elite rich, but it doesn't sound like that had anything to do with anything, because a lot of them were coal miners who were not the elite, who were a part of this problem as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's certainly true that largely, other than him, I mean, men are absent from this story and or are villains.
Yeah.
And I know I read that the kind of skinless zombies are supposed to represent like older generations teaching that to younger generations of men. And so it is something that is sort of passed down, and it felt to me very just when we talk about like rape culture or the patriarchy or things like that, it felt very, we're sort of drinking this Kool-Aid, to put it that way, because that's what we were raised in.
Right.
And that the men in the town are being taught this, and the women are being forced to forget, and then later either choosing to forget or to remember, just to deal with this whole thing.
Right. And also kind of this conversation about rape culture in general, where if it can be swept under the rug, it will be, and that's okay. That makes everything okay. And that is the preferred like way of dealing with it, especially for the men who think that they are allowed to do this, which is, again, like the same level of conversation, which it took years and years and years to realize, hey, this is really, really a heinous crime and trauma. We should be talking about it instead of just dismissing this as boys will be boys, which in a lot of cultures teach this culture. Like, yes, to show that you are masculine, this type of culture should be practiced, but not talked out aloud about.
Right. And we'll talk about this more in a second, but also if you do talk out about it, then go to the sanatorium, my friend.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's on you. We're not gonna stop anything.
Right.
Essentially.
Right. And
unless it's like cramping all of our styles.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's getting in the way of me continuing to do my horrible things. Yeah. There's also a conversation about women believing women. This is kind of big, and there's sort of flashbacks between V and L's friendship. And there's one where they talk about like believing each other. L has a knife that says "told you so," which comes up later, is very important. But here's a quote. "You're a f***ing liar. I would never lie to you about something like this. You can't just skip town and forget that something happened. You can't forget that you forgot." And that was L to V, when V is like, I don't want to deal with this. But yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier, there is also this theme of trans and homophobia, or just like women not behaving, in quotes, to the men's liking, because people, largely women, are being sent to this sanatorium to, quote, get well for being gay, for dressing inappropriately, for just noticing something's wrong.
Right. I thought it needs to be noted, and I'm sure it has some kind of symmetry as well, that the sanatorium was then turned into heaven on earth.
Yes.
That is now the place that people like. That is the same place. So it needs to be noted that this is kind of reverted back to what it was intended, a place to abuse women.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like the example of the witch, when she was a young girl and been revealed she's gone through this horribly traumatic event, and they're like, put her in the sanatorium.
Right.
I think that's pretty telling.
It is.
Well, there are some positive things, though. Friendship and love is a big theme in this, obviously, between Octavia and Helidora, V and L. The shared sensations. I thought this was really interesting because I think this is something on the lines of, you know, when you're really close to someone, or when you even go through a generational trauma, there are those things that you share. So I thought that's what was trying to be conveyed there. Could just be me. Also, the believing each other line. I love this quote. "Sometimes you've got to listen, but sometimes you've got to write your own f***ing endings." And that was when they realized Jessica was at the club. They'd listened to the witch's story. Like, we can't wait around anymore. We've got to write our own ending. And then just seeing their friendship over the years and seeing them fight, but then make up. I'm not entirely sure at the end what was going on, but, you know.
Yeah. Well, in the story, too, they go from L's perspective to V's perspective to L's. Like, you get a lot. And obviously, and then to Jessica's perspective, because she's telling her story as well, which is kind of a sideline explanatory of like how things will be solved at the end, essentially. But I think that makes it interesting because you do get two different perspectives. To me, it looked like L was in love with V.
Yeah.
And knew that she was in love with V, but like V was in love with Jessica at that time, and L was just kind of waiting it out. L was also the one, like, you have that person, and I think we see this a lot, especially think about like the Me Too era, who is ready to face their trauma, who is ready to do it in order to get justice, as where there are other survivors who are not ready to deal with that, to process that trauma, or there's a level of trauma that they can't afford to take at that moment, or it'll make it worse. So I feel like those two represented really interesting takes in that. And so Elle's maturity in her like feelings for V, I think it was a big part of the story. But also Elle is also a lot more realistic and a little more pessimistic, because she's like, the world, I can't leave this area because my parents, as much as I love them, they're amazing parents, they can't afford to send me. And so instead of like, I don't want to go through this because it's worse to be accepted and not being able to go to a college because I know I can't afford it. And like, that's so real, because this was based in the 90s too. So that's the other part, is this is based in the 90s, and you have that time. Like, we talked about this repeatedly with all the 90s comedies. Like, college was different. Like, it was a lot harder for you to afford because it was a privilege. It was those who had money. It was more for that, or those willing to get debt in hopes that they can pay it back one day, which is not always the case.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was my vibe I got as well, was that Elle was really into V and V was into Jessica. Which I have to say, I'm glad. I kind of thought they were going to turn Jessica into like a bimbo or something.
Right. There really was no girl against girl in this, and I like that.
Now that you say it, I hadn't really thought about it, but we got a lot of different perspectives of women experiencing this trauma in different ways. Because you heard the witch's story, you heard Jessica's story, obviously you heard V and L.
So one review implies that, and I don't know if I didn't catch it, because reading straight through the comic, when you're not used to it, I'm like, oh, I have to figure out where to go in these boxes. I know that sounds so like,
no, I get you,
trivial, but I was like, oh, I think I read ahead. Let me go back down here. Like, I did that a couple of times. But like that, the actual Cersei was actually a trans woman. Okay, so like that's not like the way they kind of, because I really appreciated it. I know they did this on purpose. As much as it's horror and as much as this is about trauma, they didn't want to replay trauma. So they kind of bypassed it, and I had to like, oh, they're insinuating this, because it took me a minute to figure out that the young witch was being molested. I was like, what's happening? She just went to it. And what that was, and I actually really appreciated the way they handled that, because oftentimes this becomes like trauma porn in that measure, because we know, but it took me a minute to figure out, oh, well, she's also trans. Okay, because they never discredit her transness. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't ever dead name her, they don't ever like misgender her, which obviously they believe they're queer writers as well. They're like, nah, we're not. Like, this is the first time I think I've seen it done so well that I was like, oh, that's what they're implying. But it took me a minute. I was like, oh, okay. Which brings to a whole level of like, because they don't even talk about her trauma, just like she was just there.
Right.
It did say the way she dressed, and I didn't know what that meant. In my mind, I thought she was dressing like a man. So that's what I thought was happening. I was very like, huh, okay.
Yeah.
It did take me a minute.
I get that. There was a bunch of things that I was like, wait, does that mean what I think it means? And I would look it up, and I was like, okay, yes, okay.
Okay. I think that's probably where I missed out, is I didn't look up everything, and I waited till the end, because we know this, a lot of books and movies, like they have that at the end where it makes sense after the fact, and then you have to go back and reread and like, oh, I get it. That makes more sense now. That kind of level of like coming back to it. That makes a lot, like, why? Because in my head, it's like, why is it so traumatic that first of all, maybe they just slept at the theater, and why it was so big. I was like, what's happening? What's happening? Well,
that's why, I mean, again, it's clear that the people who made this, at least some of them, well, obviously the author, because she's written, look, if you don't know her, the reason I wanted to talk about her, she has written a lot of really critically acclaimed horror books. It's clear that they know their horror. And so again, like, I feel like the waking up in the theater, that was kind of a red herring for horror fans, because that is the exact plot point. Yeah. So I was like, zombies, and then there were zombies, but they weren't. They weren't
quite
the zombies I was expecting.
Right. Like, no, there was, because because it kind of gave that not true detective feel, but you know what I'm talking about with that creature, the antler creature that no one knew what was happening. And I say this as a person who's never fully watched the entire season of any True Detective. I just know that creature because someone dressed up like that, and I was like, what are you and why are you like this?
Ooh.
On Halloween. They did a great job too. They were like, I was like, what the hell is this? But in that, like, that's where I even was like, is that where we're going? Because that's interesting.
Well, that does lead me to the next theme I wanted to talk about, which is just kind of a run through of some horror elements that were in here. The zombies and creatures were one of them. I did think it was interesting that the men are sort of mindless monsters, whereas the women are intelligent beings trapped in animal form.
Right.
Like they're being objectified.
Yes. I also thought that was interesting that they were obviously very protective. And so they would protect, like the rabbit was trying to stop them from going too far ahead because she knew that the zombie was ahead of them. And so like that creature stopped them, as well as the deer protecting L and V when they were being attacked by all the zombies, but attacking her father.
Yeah.
Because it was a man.
Yeah, and it's at the end, you see at least one of them, I believe the bunny, the rabbit, taking the mushrooms and remembering and becoming a woman again. And then you see another one.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
I need to go back and look. I missed that part.
And then the other one does not take it. So I thought that was interesting, kind of the dichotomy of what happens there. Also, the void, I thought was interesting because a lot of people had a lot to say about the void. Jessica described it as it opens when women are feeling large emotions. But when she remembers and the void becomes so huge that men and the zombies, they fall in it, presumably to their death.
Yes. Or to become zombies.
A lot of people wrote about, her body becoming like justice almost.
Right. Like she was revenge.
Yes. Yeah. But that void, I just feel like a void invokes so many. It just feels so empty. It can never be filled. Like her justice, it'll never, given what happened to her, she could do this all day and it will still never go away.
And I wonder too, for some survivors, it's about that feeling when you come to the point of realizing the pain. So the truth of it all, to just want to be swallowed up, just wanting to become nothing, because nothing is better than pain. It really, obviously we talk out of experience in a lot of this. There's so much that once you are in the depth of that pain, you would do anything. You feel like you could do and would do anything to make it go away, which is part of the big trauma that we talk about often, is that if you can get past this, and you can, eventually you can with time. Healing takes so much time and it may never be complete, but it does happen. But at that point before that, it feels so impossible that you just wish to become nothing. And because oftentimes, not for everyone, I think obviously people are people, so therefore they're going to have different emotions and reactions and all of that. But oftentimes that pain is just you just want to take everything with you sometimes too. Not only do you wish that you could either you could get rid of that pain or you can give up that pain, that level. Yeah. And I feel like that kind of is part of that symbolism of her realizing, oh my gosh, and that allowing it too far along, kind of like her mother.
Yeah.
Incapacitates you completely.
Yeah. And when you're talking about, we were earlier, intergenerational trauma, her mom, I mean, she looked dead. She looked
I thought she was dead. I was very confused about what was happening.
She might have been, but she was like a void that looked like stuff was growing out of her.
Right.
And also just the idea of all of those memories coming back to you at once and how overwhelming that must be. I really appreciated the different ways this graphic novel showcased the different ways people who have gone through things like this do experience it, because Jessica chose to remember, and it's, the jury is out on how she will handle that in the end. Will she become like her mom? Will she have a healthier outcome? We don't know, but she did choose to remember it. So seeing those different ways people were trying to just really survive this horrible thing that happened to them.
Right. And it could be a conversation too about her mom and Jessica, her mom internalizing so much that she got engulfed in that because she had no other choice at that point. And she didn't know she could remember, as where Jessica did remember and became kind of like rage and then came back to herself. Like, kind of interesting. Just now that I've looked back at the book, y'all had to look back at the book. I saw the rabbit turning into a woman, but then you also see the next one, the deer not eating the mushroom and just becoming an actual deer and moving on. So like the people, how they react, how they deal with all these things, there's no right or wrong. Like this is all about what they can handle and how they can handle it, and the level of like being given a choice. Obviously that's that bigger conversation. But yeah, just like you were saying too, it feels like their personality type is what makes them become whatever. So if you become the rabbit, the bird, the deer, or for Jessica, the void, and her mom, the void. Maybe that's generational as well, but it felt like a conversation about how women may deal with that trauma, whether it's wanting to get revenge, whether it's to protect other women, whether it's to take everything out. Like it just allowing that rage to be. Like it was an interesting conversation, especially in regards to a woman, because you don't see that.
Yeah. And I think that choice, as you mentioned, was very, very important to the whole thing of like how you choose to deal with this. And it was a choice that so many of them hadn't ever had. I also thought it was interesting. I'm still not sure what I think about this, but about Jessica's mom putting her in the pageant circuit, because that just feels so like, But I mean, I guess she didn't remember, but it feels like you're putting your daughter in a lot of danger in that situation in this particular town.
Right. And her daughter didn't really necessarily care about any of that. She wanted to dance, but it made her mom happy. And the first time seeing her mom happy, because she hadn't been happy until her daughter won. But it did seem interesting because that conversation once again was her avoiding so much and being miserable and so like caught up in trying not to be the void, but then her daughter doing this and being like, oh, we can still have normal life, like how beautiful, and like she gets to gloat about this, and then that gave too much void where it came kind of popped out. That was interesting. There was a lot of side things that I was like, because that we never really get a story about what Elle's mother did for the witch and what she was indebted to her to save the husband, and I was like, what is this about?
And
also, Elle was all about the witch, because Elle was like, thank you so much for sharing, while V was like, what the what are you doing? And like V obviously had never met her, because when she came in, she was like, I'm here to see your mother. And she's like, girl, what? I'm the witch.
Right.
I'm 100 years old. Why are you talking to me? Or 70 years old. But like V's connectedness with that world is reticence, as versus Elle has always been a part of that world. Whether it's her mom, again, her mom has a relationship, some type of relationship with a witch. We just don't know what. It's never mentioned. We just know that Elle knew that there was a contingency plan, that if something were to happen, I don't know if it was specific to her father. Like, this is the way they were protecting the father because they knew these animals hated men, or what. But like something was there, and her being like, you know what to do. I need you to do this. Like, without even mentioning the witch, not even like nothing. She just said, you know what I need you to do. And then that's the end. And you're like, what? And not realizing they had a connection. So that felt like a side story that I was like, Also, Pearl, by the way, I skipped ahead to make sure I didn't die. I was so worried. I was so upset. I think I yelped at one point when she got attacked when they were in the woods.
Pearl the dog, everyone.
Pearl the dog. I was on edge because I'm like, look at this therapy dog. They take this dog to elderly places, nursing homes or whatnot. And like, she just hangs out with all of them. That's a part of her duty. And I was like, if they kill this dog, I'm gonna fight somebody. Everything else is fine, but not Pearl. Damn it. That was very
Pearl made it.
But also, that was also another side story that I was like, Also, I think it also that scene with the older woman talking about losing her son. Again, it came after boys. It just came after boys. So her son and her husband, but that she lived above a cold sinkhole, essentially, kind of, and she was okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was like, well, that line where she talks about, I'm glad we can breathe this air for us to clean, because it gave them jobs, but it was killing her. But at the same time, she was like, nah, my family's gone, I'm good. But it was an interesting conversation about that gentrification that you were talking about, because she was so grateful to have a job, but for not realizing they were killing her as well.
Yeah. She's in this nursing home dying. It was I think there's more of them. This was 1 through 6. So
I'm confused. Yeah, someone tell me. I did not realize that this was like just one. Is there several more books, continuations of this one story, or is it now complete and we're gone to a different? Because I know Hill House Comics, that is with DC, is horror.
Yeah.
A lot of horror stories. Or horror comics. So do we continue on with L and V?
I don't know, because like I tried to look into it because I didn't want, when we were choosing this, a fear of mine was we would get to the end and it would be like, whoa, let's do
Edition 2, yeah.
But it felt very complete.
Yeah, it does. It felt like it was an ending.
Yeah, and I looked into it and I didn't see anything else. But yeah, correct us if we're wrong, because it does feel like there was a bunch of little side quests.
So what I'm seeing is it is 6 parts in one. They were all individually issued. It is a limited series. It's complete. Limited run comic series, so it's done. And the final one was released, or not final. It was the hardcover edition, collected edition, was released in 2020. Oh, actually September 29th of 2020. So we're coming up on its 4-year anniversary.
Congrats.
Congrats. Look at us being timely once again. But yeah, so it shows all of that. And I'm looking at the comics as they were released, and they had different, yeah, we see it. We see the, if you buy, I don't know, because you've got the Kindle version. I actually bought the paperback version, but in each one it shows the cover as the same as they had released it, I believe. Yeah, that's the same as they had the cover for the release. So it's in there, but like chaptered.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll let you look at it when you come over, Anney.
Okay. That does lead me into my final thing. I just wanted to call out the illustrations. They were amazing.
They're beautiful.
They're like haunting. Yes. They're haunting. But I really love there's different illustration styles based on yes, the covers, but in certain emotions, there are different illustration styles. The contrast I really like. There's kind of like a set of colors that they use a lot, but then when another color pops in there, I really, really enjoyed that as well. And there were just so many panels that illustrated so much in a small panel. I remember one is when you see V with Jessica for the first time, who again, I was worried they were going to make into some kind of, horrendous mean girl.
Yeah.
But you see them and V is wearing her Converses. It's just their shoes. V is wearing Converses and Jessica's wearing nice, stilettos or heels. But that just communicates so much in that one frame. So I feel like the illustration was really fun, and it was really vibrant, and it did a lot of different things, which kept it exciting. So really, really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It was very good.
This was a good pick. It's good for any time, but especially good for as we are moving into Halloween times. I highly recommend it. So
yes,
go check it out. if you have any interest. And as always, if you have any suggestions for what we should do next, if you have any thoughts about this, please let us know. You can email us at stephanieandmomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast and on TikTok and Instagram at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a Tea Public Store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.